Thank you. So like the rabbi said, I just wrote a book called I Wanted Fries with That, How to Ask for What You Want and Get What You Need. The book came out in the fall. And so what I'm going to do today is tell you how I became an ombudsperson. And I'm going to tell you how I became a writer. And then I'm going to tell you how I came to write this book. And at the end, I'm going to give you a couple of tips for good complaining. Does that sound good to everybody? Is that what you were expecting? Okay. So I'm going to read to you a little bit from the book here and there, a few sentences. Before we get started, there's one thing I need to tell you. I'm a chronic exaggerator. My stories are all true, basically, but I tend to add colorful details to make you laugh or to make you think or to protect someone's identity. Let me give you an example. In this book, I tell a story about speaking at a fancy luncheon for fancy ladies who lunch. That happened. I tell you that one of them asked for my advice about her husband who is constantly on his cell phone. That also happened. But I don't remember for sure if they served crudité with salmon tartare or Pacific bluefin grilled on the roof of a car. All I can tell you is I promise whatever they served, it was not a PB&J. The people I'm talking about exist for the most part, but I might give them a makeover, which could possibly include changing their name, age, and type of pet. I might make an uncle into an aunt to protect their identity, or because it flows better in the story. I might make a blonde into a brunette, or a bulldog into a Boston Terrier, but I will not turn a blonde into a bulldog unless she absolutely deserves it. So there you see a little bit where I'm coming from. So how I became an ombudsperson is this. I always worked in healthcare. I always worked in quality improvement in healthcare. So you probably know what that is because it's in the news all the time now. It relates to infection rates and problem solving and mistakes in hospitals. I worked for the American Academy of Neurology in Minnesota. I worked for the Toronto Hospital in, this is very easy group participation. I worked for the Toronto Hospital in, yes, I see a few of you playing along, okay. And so I worked all over, always trying to problem solve in a big scale. And then I moved to Montreal. So I lived in Toronto, I lived in Minneapolis, I lived in, and I moved back to Montreal. My husband started a business and he needed help calling people and collecting money. And I figured I could do that. I spent so much time nagging people to get their projects done. I'll just nag people for money. And so what happened was I was on the phone doing collections for him and I really didn't know what I was doing. I really didn't. Like I did not know what a purchase order was. I have no bookkeeping abilities. And thankfully, I'm knocking wood, the business started to do well, which meant there was no place for me anymore. And I said to him on a Friday, I said, listen, I really like working with you, but I have my own career in healthcare quality and I'm going to leave the company and you'll hire a real bookkeeper. And I said, but my expertise is so narrow, like healthcare quality is so narrow. It's going to take me years, months to find a job. And the next day I had little kids and I was putting down newspaper for them to paint. Does everyone remember newspaper? And so in those days, there was a career section and you got your jobs from the paper. And so I thought, I put down the career section for them to paint. And there was an ad for Maimonides Hospital, was looking for somebody bilingual, somebody with a healthcare background, somebody with a master's in health administration, and somebody who liked and was interested in complaint resolution. And it was like they had my picture in the ad. I knew, like I just knew. And so I sent in my resume. I had an interview early the next week, probably on Wednesday. They called me that day and hired me to be their ombudsman. And within 7 days, I had my new job. So I learned very much how to do it like on the go. And I had all kinds of interesting complaints. And so I have a chapter in the book taken from, so what happened was, just to be fair, I worked at Maimonides, Elder Care, Miriam Home, Waldorf, and a few places in the West Island that are small little places where you work part-time, like CHSLD, Manoir de l'Ouest de l'Île, and a few little places. So this example, I actually don't remember anymore because it's so old where it was pulled from. It's chapter 14 and it's called How to Stay Alive When Your Complaint is Being Investigated. So I'm working as an ombudsperson and somebody comes to see me because His wife has just been told that she needs to use a wheelchair, and he is really, really upset about it. And he says, I don't want my Agnes in a wheelchair. I mean, the idea of it, he says, the thought of my Aggie, who used to hustle and Watusi with the best of them, stuck in a wheelchair, who is suggesting this? I want a full investigation. And I'm sitting there and I'm rapidly experiencing many emotions because I feel terrible for this man, Agnes's husband. Aging is tough, and caring for a sick loved one is tough. And nursing homes, even the best possible ones, can be tough. And I wrote this pre-COVID, right? Think about that. So now they're really challenging and difficult. I wrote this last year. I feel that the love he has for his wife is beautiful and has to be acknowledged. But I'm also nervous because he's getting extremely upset and he's pale and he's getting clammier and clammier. And so sometimes to calm people down in such situations, I ask them questions that cause them to pause for a moment and reminisce. I ask how he and Agnes met. I am hoping that they met by a cool river on a warm, sunny day so that maybe the image of his beloved under a weeping willow or a towering pine will give this gentleman a chance to collect himself. Bad idea. They met after World War II. Having both lost their families in the war, they were sent to a displaced persons camp in Europe, where, among the disease and the army-issued tents, 17-year-old Agnes Rothenberg and 16-year-old Napoleon Cloutier fell in love. By the way, I made up their names. There is no one to give permission for them to be married because both of their families have perished. Can you imagine? I was trying to cheer this guy up, and this is the memory that he has to relive. So anyway, it's a beautiful story. They found someone who would perform the ceremony. It does nothing to calm him down. And so I realized that I give him a glass of water and I tell him to breathe and nothing's working. So I end up calling upstairs and a nurse comes down and starts looking after him. And do you know that this gentleman left in a stretcher? And when the Urgence Santé people came, one said to the other, like, what was wrong with this guy? And the other one said, il était avec l'ombudsman. And I tell you that story because it's funny. By the way, Jewel Lowenstein, you're a good audience. Thank you. I see you laughing at all my jokes. Thank you very much. I like to pick on you. I can manage to pick on you even on Zoom, by the way. None of you are safe. So anyway, so he left with and one said to the other, he was with the ombudsman, and I was heartbroken because I thought, this is not a plan. We cannot have people getting so sick from complaining that they're leaving in stretchers. I need to help teach people how to complain effectively and calmly so that you can get your complaint heard and you can get what you need and want. And one of the ways I'm going to do that is by speaking to groups like you. And one of the ways I'm going to do that is by writing a book like this. Any questions or comments on this part so far? No. Hold on, let me page over. Questions or comments? No. Okay.
All good.
Good. Okay.
I'll let you know if there's something urgent.
Okay. So I thought, how am I going to become a writer? Like, how is this going to happen? And I wrote to the West End Times and I said, I'm thinking about writing a column called Ask the Ombudsman, where I would give you sample complaints and then I would answer them. It's a weekly paper. And they wrote me back saying, okay, sounds good. And that was it. Like, that's how it happened that I became a writer. People have very long, complex stories. Mine was so simple. And I did that for a long time. And then my great uncle, who recently passed away, who was a very philanthropic man, said, you have so much to say. Why don't you write a book and I'll publish it? And I thought, okay, how hard could it be? And I sat down and wrote the book, and I knew so little about writing books. I don't even think I read it over. Like, I didn't know that you were supposed to have an editor and that I just wrote the book. I handed it to him and he had a typeset, and it was a little purple book called The Art of Complaining Effectively. And what happened with that was I didn't think it through very carefully, and he had 2,200 or 2,500 books printed, and all of a sudden they're in my garage. And I'm like, oh my God, now what am I going to do? I got to get rid of these books. And my deal with my uncle was he wanted to do it as a philanthropic gesture. He didn't want me to make any money. So that's how I started speaking, because I would come, like, pretend we were in person, and I would say to the temple, let me come and speak to you, but the condition is I need to be able to give away my books. to everybody. So like, you're doing me a favor, I'm doing you a favor. I need to get these books out. And it grew. And the book, again, like so much of my story is luck. The book did really well, knock wood again. And I got to be on Mitsumi, and I got to be on CJD. This is 5 or 6 years ago. And I started to tour a little bit. I went to Nashville, Tennessee. I went to Thunder Bay, and all the while carting my purple books with me and selling them. And at one point I was on CBC Marketplace, and they said, they called me to come on the show, and they flew me to Toronto, and it was a fantastic experience. But the funny thing was, I had to be on Amazon, and I was not on Amazon. And they tell you like your book is about to air. And so I retyped the whole book into Kindle because it was faster than figuring out how to upload it. So I had a lot of misadventures along the way. So now, how did we get from there to here? This is part 3. So one thing about being a writer that I really have enjoyed is getting to know other writers. And this story is called it's chapter 23, How to Get on the Kiddie Coaster with Your 3-year-old If You Are Wet and Black. I'm at my favorite writing conference called Hippocamp in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And this time I sit down next to a woman who is knitting a pale blue baby blanket. I tell her how much I love knitting, but I can't knit and take notes at the same time. She says knitting helps her listen to presentations. We chat on a bit more. She works in education administration. I work in education administration. We both write nonfiction. Her daughter plays basketball, and she always knits at games. My daughter plays basketball too, and I always knit at games. Well, Angie says, my daughter's black, and she plays on an almost white team. I knit so that I don't embarrass her by calling out. This can't be possible. I say to her, my daughter's white and she plays on an almost all black team. She doesn't want to hear my voice at all. When she first started to play, I may have accidentally yelled offense when they were on defense. And that's when I lost my credibility and picked up my knitting needles. So anyway, Angie introduces herself and tells me she's sad today because her mom passed away 3 years ago from dementia. You are never going to believe this. 3 years ago, my mom passed away from dementia, I say. Angie opens her arms, I fall into them, and we've been friends ever since. So how does this relate to being on the kiddie coaster? I'll tell you. So anyway, it's an annual conference. I go back every year. And one year, Angie tells me the story about how her and her husband, who are both black, take their 3 kids, who are obviously also all black, to an amusement park in the deep south. And it's one of those giant amusement parks where there's a water park as part of the park, and people are going around like, and if any of you have been around, or even you could see it on TV lately, it's not obvious what is a bathing suit and what isn't, right? Because people wear bra tops and people wear long sleeves to swim, and bathing suits, all kinds of styles. And so she goes with her 3-year-old to get on the kiddie coaster, and the woman says to her, you cannot get on in what you're wearing. You're all wet. And she says, well, I'm all wet because I'm in your water park. And if you look over there, that ride is a splash ride, and we got wet. And the woman says, you're not going on my ride. And Angie looks to her left, looks to her right, and everybody is white. And so she thinks about it and she says, how am I going to do this? Like, I have my 3-year-old with me. I'm not going to sit in the heat of July with my 3-year-old while we're waiting for the big kids to come back from their ride, and she can't go on this ride. So she asked for a manager, and she asked for a manager and asked for a manager and asked for a manager. And eventually someone comes to help her work it out. So the manager's manager does not know what to do. He straightens the collar on his golf shirt and folds down the pleats of his khaki shorts. He looks down at the long line of people. He then looks at Angie and her adorable daughter and says, ma'am, what do you want? The subtext here is, what will make you shut up? What will make you go away? I'm in the no mood for a full-scale protest, especially from a black woman, because that will not reflect well on me or my park. Well, Angie says, if I can't get on this ride without a t-shirt, then get me a t-shirt. Her subtext is, if you are going to make unreasonable rules and enforce them only sporadically, then you better be prepared to cough up complimentary t-shirts. So the guy ultimately goes and gets a t-shirt for her, her daughter, her other 2 kids, and her husband, and they continue in the park. And what's interesting about this chapter is a few things. First of all, when Angie told me the story, I said to her, can I use it in my book? because I knew right away that I wanted to talk about issues of color and race and gender when it comes to complaining effectively. And I knew they would be touchy. And as a white person, I'm always thinking about like, what is the best way to communicate this? So she said, yeah, you could use them in my book. So anyways, I go home, I write the book, and I send her the chapter. And she's like, you're using this in your book? I said, I told you I was using it in my book. So she said, well, I thought it was a hypothetical book. I didn't realize you were writing an actual book. So I thought that was really funny because like we're at a writing conference, everybody has a book, you know, but she didn't realize that I had like a book. So she was a little taken aback, but you know, the thing is that when I initially wrote it, I guess it wasn't so racially oriented. Maybe I was a little too gentle. And Angie is the one who said to me, turn it up a notch. And you know, so my book launched in October. That was before George Floyd. That was before the protests that we saw in the street. And I have felt this way forever. And so when I've been doing my touring October, November, December, it's crazy, but the two chapters that I chose to read all the way through are the chapter on elderly and rights and the chapter on Black and Lives Mattering. And what is in the news today? You know, and so that tells us a few things. One of them is these social justice issues are not new, and the vulnerable areas of our population are going to need our help having their voices heard, all of our help. And whether it be complaining effectively or whether it be speaking up for justice, like I don't care what you call it, these are areas that I believe are important and need our attention probably the most. So now, that's then how we got to actually write about fries is that at the same conference, there was a panel. So everybody, it's a very small conference of probably 200 and something people. So you all get to know each other. And I was chatting with the woman next to me about how I had just bought a pair of shoes for $5. Has anyone ever bought a pair of shoes for $5? Like I was so proud of myself. You have? Yeah, few people have. It's a great feeling. So I'm chatting to this complete stranger next to me about how I bought these shoes for $5. And then she says, oh, can you watch my stuff? I'm on this panel. And I take the thing and I'm like, oh, I wonder what panel. It's the agents and publishers panel. And I'm like, why would she be on the, oh my God, I just told this big New York agent that I bought these shoes for $5. I'm laughing at my own joke, but like it was really embarrassing. Anyway, when it was over, she said, I saw you at the open mic night the other night because I had read from my purple book. And we got to talking and she said, if you write fiction, then I'll represent you. And I said, I don't know how to write fiction. And she said, it's not that hard. So I wrote a novel about a very innocent girl who gets a job as the complaint department for a sex toy company. And it was really funny, but it was not well written and we couldn't sell it. It sat in a drawer, So I've been with Veronica for about 5 years. And for 5 years, we've tried to sell a bunch of different things and we didn't get anywhere. And this was like our last ditch, like either it's gonna really work or we're gonna give up. And look what happened. So you know what they say about overnight success, right? Like I'm telling you the whole long story of how it happened. And like from one second to the next, now I'm the complaint expert at CTV. I have a regular CJAD spot with Natasha Hall. Plus I'm the ombudsman for Concordia. I should say mainly because that's like my big job that I really like, but I don't like mixing the two. But so like now all these things happened out of it and now I'm here talking to you, but it was a long time, now you know, a lot of time and a lot of mishaps in the coming, but that's how it ended up. So now you want to know how to be good complainers. I'm going to tell you. Okay, so the most important thing about being a good complainer is this. You have to at least try. If you say nothing, nothing's ever going to change. If you speak up, you have a chance. So listen to me. I don't want you to get caught up into it not being perfect. Maybe you don't have the exact right words. Maybe you're not speaking to exactly the right person, but you have to start somewhere and you have to try. Because if we don't try, nothing is ever going to change. Speaking up for yourself works. Even if you stumble, it works. The second theme, So that's the first theme. The second theme is that if at first you don't succeed, you have to be prepared to keep trying. So for example, if you send an email and it doesn't work, try the phone. If the phone call doesn't work, go in person. If you try the person in front, okay, I had an example about an airline, but I don't want to get into airlines because it's too sad. Remember airlines? It's too sad. We don't want to talk about that now. But the point is that if you're trying to get your way and the first person can't help you, try the second person. The second person can't help you, try the third person. You have to go into it with the mindset that I am prepared to try multiple avenues to get what I want and need. When it comes to interpersonal issues and we want someone else to change, that's where you have to think about theme 3. It's okay to put yourself and your needs ahead of someone else's. So if one of you, such as the host, wants to start dinner at 5 p.m., and one of you, such as the guest, is always late, both of you are not going to get your way, right? Both things can't be true. You can't accommodate the person who's always late and start on time. Does everyone get that? So it's acceptable to put your needs first. I'm giving you permission. You can put your needs first ahead of the other person's need to be late. If you choose to ignore the problem instead of establishing clear guidelines for your family event, please know that you're making a conscious decision to choose the other person's needs ahead of your own. And if you continue to do this, you will never be able to get what you want or need. I suggest that you spend some time working on this issue, either personally or with a professional, and then come back and pick up this book again. And I mean what I'm saying, because if you're someone who never wants to acknowledge your own needs and you're always accepting, like, you know, the stereotype about the mom who always eats the burnt toast. If you're a person who always takes the burnt toast, who always takes the lower position, who's never willing to do something for yourself, that's something very serious that you need to work on, because sometimes to be fair, sometimes you're going to have the burnt toast, sometimes I'm going to have the burnt toast, sometimes we're going to throw out the burnt toast. Theme 4 is about compromise and creativity. If you can't get exactly what you want, what else can you get? When someone denies your request, I want you to immediately start brainstorming alternatives and determining what you're prepared to live with. I expect you to understand your limits and ask for a compromise. Don't waste time getting stuck on what might have been. So like my father-in-law wanted a dentist appointment and he couldn't get his dentist appointment. They kept him waiting. And so they kept him waiting so long that he stormed out. So in the end, who loses? He lost the opportunity for a dentist appointment. If he couldn't sit and wait, he could have gone to them and said, listen, I can't wait any longer. When else can you see me? What else can we do? I have trouble sitting. You know, ask for some kind of compromise. And if they say tomorrow, then if you say, well, I don't want to come back tomorrow, then you're really never going to get this dentist appointment. So there are times where, and it's an art, not a science, but there are times where you have to compromise. 6th theme is about the responsibility to complain effectively. We asked for what we want so that we could get our French fries, our dresses returned, our problem solved. But in many cases, we don't stand to gain personally. Even when it's too late to fix the problem for ourselves, we still believe fundamentally that it needs to be fixed for everyone in line behind us. That's why I get up in the morning and resolve complaints all day. How am I for timing? That's my formal talk. Oh, right on. Whew. Look at that.